Sarah stood before the full-length mirror in her master bedroom, carefully adjusting the delicate pearl necklace James had given her for their 5th anniversary. The burgundy silk dress she'd chosen for tonight hugged her curves perfectly. Splurge she'd justified for their 10th wedding anniversary celebration. The clock on their bedroom wall showed 6:15 p.m. James would be home from his law firm soon, ready for their reservation at Bella Luna, the intimate Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. Their bedroom still held the warmth of the setting sun, casting a golden glow across the cream-colored walls and the framed photos from their wedding day. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of her necklace, remembering how James's hands had trembled slightly as he'd fastened it around her neck 5 years ago. "To many more years," he'd whispered then, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. The sudden chime of the doorbell cut through her reverie. Sarah frowned, checking her phone. No notifications about package deliveries, and James had his key. Through the bedroom window, she caught a glimpse of a sleek red sports car parked in their circular driveway. Definitely not one she recognized from their gated community. Making her way down the curved staircase, Sarah's heels clicked against the marble steps. The security monitor in the foyer showed a young woman standing on their front porch, blonde and impeccably dressed in what looked like a designer outfit. Probably another real estate agent hunting for listings in their exclusive neighborhood. Sarah opened the heavy wooden door, ready to politely but firmly send the woman away. But the practiced smile froze on her face as she took in the full picture before her. The woman couldn't have been more than 25, with perfectly styled honey blonde hair and expertly applied makeup. But what drew Sarah's attention was her midsection, a clearly pregnant belly straining against the fabric of her fitted cream dress. "Hi!" The woman's voice was bright and musical, as if this was a completely normal social call. "I'm Jessica. Is James here yet?" Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe, her knuckles going white. "James. My husband, James." "Oh." Jessica's perfect smile faltered slightly, a flicker of something, triumph, passing through her eyes. "You must be Sarah. I thought he would have told you by now." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah's legs felt unsteady beneath her, but years of corporate training kept her spine straight and her face composed. "Told me what?" Jessica's manicured hand moved to rest on her swollen belly, the gesture somehow both protective and deliberately provocative. "About us. About the baby." She let out a tinkling laugh that felt like shards of glass in Sarah's ears. "I mean, he's been promising to leave you for months now. I just couldn't wait any longer to meet you." Sarah's vision tunneled, the edges going dark as the magnitude of what was happening crashed over her. But somewhere beneath the shock, another emotion was beginning to simmer. Rage, cold and clarifying. She forced air into her lungs, her mind, racing ahead to calculations and implications even as her heart threatened to shatter. "Why don't you come in, Jessica?" The words came out smooth, controlled. "I think we have quite a lot to discuss before James gets home." Jessica's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly, clearly not expecting this reaction. She hesitated for a moment before stepping into the foyer, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. The same marble James had insisted on during their home renovation last year. Sarah realized with a bitter taste in her mouth. "What?" "A lovely home," Jessica commented, her eyes roving over the crystal chandelier, the artwork, the signs of wealth and stability that Sarah and James had built together over a decade of marriage. "James said you had good taste. Did he?" Sarah led them into the living room, gesturing for Jessica to take a seat on the cream-colored sofa. "What else has my husband been saying about me?" Jessica settled herself carefully, adjusting her dress. "Oh, you know, that you're very focused on your career, that you two had grown apart." She smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "That he needed someone who could give him what he really wants, a family." The words hit like physical blows. Sarah and James had agreed early in their marriage to prioritize their careers first. planning to start a family once they were both established. Or at least, that's what Sarah had thought they'd agreed on. "How far along are you?" Sarah asked, her voice steady even as her mind raced through timestamps and implications. 7 months. Jessica's hand caressed her belly again. "It happened at the company Christmas party. James said it was like fate brought us together. 7 months. December." The Christmas party Sarah had missed because she was closing a major corporate merger in London. Sarah maintained her composure as she poured tea into the delicate china cups her mother-in-law had given them as a wedding present. Her hands didn't shake, even as Jessica continued to detail her affair with James. "He's been so wonderful," Jessica gushed, accepting the cup. "Setting up the nursery in his new condo, picking out names together. He thinks it's a boy, but I'm hoping for a girl." "His new condo?" Sarah's voice remained steady, even as pieces clicked into place. The mysterious charges on their credit card, the business trips that had become more frequent. "Oh, yes, the penthouse at the Sovereign." Jessica's smile turned apologetic. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but he's meeting with the divorce lawyers tomorrow. He wanted to wait until after your anniversary dinner, but I just couldn't keep our joy to ourselves any longer." Sarah took a careful sip of her tea, her mind racing ahead like a computer processing data. The Sovereign, the luxury building where their investment firm handled several high-profile clients' properties, where she, as senior partner, had overseen numerous real estate transactions. "The Sovereign," Sarah repeated thoughtfully. "Unit 3201, I assume? The corner penthouse with the wraparound terrace?" Jessica's eyes widened slightly. "Yes. How did you—" "Oh, I handled the property acquisition for that entire floor." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "In fact, I believe I still have some interesting information about those units in my files." The doorbell rang again, and Sarah checked her watch. 6:45 p.m., right on time. James always was punctual. That'll be my husband now. Sarah stood smoothly. "Why don't you wait here? Let's make this a proper surprise." Sarah opened the front door to find James adjusting his tie, a bouquet of roses in his hand. "Happy anniversary, darling," he began, then froze as he registered her expression. "Come in, James." Sarah's voice was honey-sweet. "There's someone very special waiting to see you, although—" She plucked the roses from his nerveless fingers. "I think congratulations are more appropriate than anniversary wishes, don't you?" The color drained from James's face as he heard Jessica's voice call out from the living room. "James, is that you, baby?" Sarah watched her husband's carefully constructed world begin to crumble and felt a curious sense of calm settle over her. In her mind, she was already several steps ahead, planning and calculating. "Jessica was just telling me about the penthouse," she said quietly, so only James could hear. "Interesting choice, putting it in your name when the property acquisition. Guidelines clearly state all purchases must be registered to shell companies. I wonder what the ethics board would make of that." James's eyes widened in recognition. He opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah was already turning away, heading back to the living room where his pregnant mistress waited. "Now then," she called, out brightly. "Why don't we all sit down and discuss the future? I have a feeling it's going to be quite different from what either of you imagined." The living room crackled with tension as James stood in the doorway, his expensive suit suddenly seeming to hang awkwardly on his frame. Jessica beamed at him from the sofa, while Sarah calmly retook her seat, arranging her anniversary dress with deliberate precision. "Darling, look who stopped by to share the wonderful news." Sarah's voice carried a note of steel beneath its sweetness. "Jessica was just telling me all about the nursery you're planning, in the penthouse you purchased, through our firm." "Sarah, I can explain," James started, his lawyer's instincts kicking in, but Sarah held up one manicured hand, cutting him off. "Oh, I think Jessica's explained quite enough." She turned to the younger woman, whose triumphant smile had begun to falter. "Though I'm curious, Did James tell you how he managed to afford that $2 million penthouse on a junior partner's salary? Jessica's perfectly plucked brows furrowed. He said the firm was doing very well. The firm is doing excellently, Sarah agreed, particularly since I made senior partner last year. But James's name isn't on those property documents, is it? Just like it's not on the lease for your Range Rover or the Amex Black Card you've been using. James took a step forward, panic beginning to show in his eyes. Sarah, please. You see? Sarah continued, ignoring him. There's an interesting quirk in property law when it comes to purchases made with fraudulently obtained funds, especially when those purchases violate about 6 different ethics regulations. She reached for her phone, scrolling through emails with practiced ease. The penthouse purchase, the car lease, the credit cards, all processed through shell companies registered to James Harrison. But the funds? She smiled thinly. Those came from accounts belonging to Sarah Mitchell Harrison, accounts that required both signatures for major withdrawals. Jessica's hand moved protectively to her belly as understanding began to dawn. James? What is she talking about? He forged my signature, Sarah explained, her voice almost gentle. Quite convincingly, I might add. The same way he forged it on the mortgage documents, the investment accounts, and… She paused for effect. The prenuptial agreement modification he filed last month. James sank into an armchair, his face ashen. How did you… find out? Sarah finished for him. I am a senior partner at one of the city's top investment firms, James. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I've been documenting everything since the first suspicious transaction appeared. I just needed to understand the full scope of your plan. She turned back to Jessica. Tell me, when exactly did he promise to marry you? Jessica's confident demeanor had completely crumbled. 3 months ago, she whispered. After we found out it was a boy. He said once the divorce was final. Ah, yes. The divorce. Sarah reached into her anniversary gift bag and pulled out a manila envelope. The one he planned to surprise me with tomorrow, using the conveniently modified prenup that would leave me with nothing while he walked away with all our joint assets. She spread the documents across the coffee table. Bank statements, property, records, forged signatures highlighted in damning yellow. Unfortunately for both of you, I've already submitted evidence of financial fraud to the firm's ethics board. They're particularly interested in the creative bookkeeping James has been doing with client accounts. James lurched to his feet. You can't prove… Actually, I can. Sarah's smile was razor sharp. Who do you think has been handling the internal audit of your department for the past 3 months? Amazing what people will tell you when they think. You're just doing routine compliance checks. She turned to Jessica, whose mascara had begun to smear with silent tears. I assume he told you the prenup would protect his assets? That you and the baby would be set for life? Jessica nodded mutely. Here's what's actually going to happen, Sarah said, her voice taking on the same tone she used in high-stakes negotiations. James is going to face criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. The penthouse, the car, the gifts, all purchased with stolen money, will be seized. And you… She softened slightly. You should probably call your parents. You're going to need somewhere to live. You'd send your child's father to jail? Jessica's voice cracked. My husband made his choices, Sarah replied calmly. Just like you made yours when you decided to show up here tonight. The difference is, I've spent the last 3 months making mine. She stood, smoothing her dress. Now, I believe I have a dinner reservation to keep. James, the FBI will be here shortly. I'd suggest waiting for them. Jessica. She paused at the doorway. The guest bathroom is down the hall if you need to fix your makeup, though I doubt it will help your appearance in tomorrow's papers when this story breaks. As Sarah collected her purse and car keys, she could hear Jessica's sobs and James's desperate attempts to make phone calls. But her mind was already moving forward, planning her next moves. After all, she thought as she slipped into her car, Revenge was a dish best served with impeccable documentation. Sarah sat at her reserved table at Bella Luna, calmly sipping a glass of champagne as she watched the scene unfold through the restaurant's front window. The FBI agents had arrived right on schedule, their dark vehicles pulling up outside her, home just as she was being seated at her anniversary dinner for one. Her phone buzzed with incoming messages, first from the firm's ethics board confirming receipt of her evidence package, then from her private investigator documenting James's arrest. She had paid extra to have photos taken. They would make an interesting addition to the company newsletter. "Mrs. Harrison?" The maitre d' approached tentatively. "There's a call for you from the police department." "Thank you, Antonio." Sarah smiled warmly. "But I believe it's Ms. Mitchell now. And please let them know I'll return their call after. I've finished my celebration dinner." She turned her attention to the menu, though she already knew what she would order. The same dish she'd had on their first date here, when James had seemed so different. So honest. Her phone buzzed again. Jessica's father this time, a prominent real estate developer whose business relied heavily on Sarah's firm. "Mr. Peterson," she answered smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd call." "Sarah, please," he began, his voice strained. "Surely we can handle this discreetly, for everyone's sake?" "Of course we can," Sarah replied, pausing to order her entree. "Just like how discreetly you handled the zoning changes for that new development project. The one that mysteriously passed despite environmental concerns? I'm sure the ethics board would love to know more about that too." She could almost hear him deflate. "What do you want?" "Nothing you can offer," Sarah said simply. "Your daughter made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. Just like James does. Though I suggest getting her a good lawyer. She might need one when the fraud investigation expands." As she ended the call, Sarah noticed her hands were perfectly steady as she reached for her champagne. 3 months of careful planning, of documenting every transaction, every lie, every betrayal. It had all led to this moment. Her phone lit up with a text from Rachel, her best friend and the firm's head of compliance. "Board meeting moved to tomorrow morning. They want to discuss James's replacement." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. James had never understood that her supposed weakness, her attention to detail, her careful documentation, her obsession with compliance, would be his undoing. He had dismissed her as too soft for the cutthroat world of finance, never realizing she was simply playing a longer game. Through the window, she watched as James was escorted into an FBI vehicle, his perfectly tailored suit wrinkled, his carefully styled hair disheveled. Jessica stood on the sidewalk, mascara streaking her cheeks, one hand clutching her belly while the other held her phone to her ear, probably trying to reach one of the many friends who would suddenly become unavailable. Dory. Waiter arrived with her entree, handmade fettuccine with shaved truffles. "Another glass of champagne, Ms. Mitchell?" "Yes, please." Sarah smoothed her napkin in her lap. "After all, I have quite a lot to celebrate." Her phone chimed with an email from the firm's managing partner. "Emergency partnership meeting, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Need to discuss transition of Harrison accounts and leadership restructure." Perfect timing. The partnership had been debating opening a new division focused on compliance and fraud prevention. Sarah had already prepared a detailed proposal, complete with case studies drawn from James's creative accounting. As she savored her meal, Sarah reflected on the past 3 months. The nights spent gathering evidence, the careful documentation of every forged signature, the quiet conversations with key employees in James's department. She had built her case methodically, understanding that revenge wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about ensuring the consequences were inescapable. Her anniversary dinner became a celebration of a different kind, not of a marriage, built on lies, but of her own transformation from trusting wife to architect of justice. James had taught her more than he realized about the mechanics of betrayal. Now, those lessons would reshape not just her life, but the entire firm. The dessert. Menu arrived just as her phone displayed another call, this time from James's mother. Sarah declined it with a flick of her finger, instead opening the preliminary press release her PR team had prepared. Tomorrow, the story would break. Rising star attorney exposed in fraud scandal. Prominent firm announces new compliance division. Headed by wronged wife turned whistleblower. Sarah ordered tiramisu, James's favorite dessert. As she waited, she began composing an email to the firm's clients, ensuring them their accounts were secure and outlining the new oversight measures being implemented. The next morning dawned bright and clear as Sarah strode into the firm's offices, her heels clicking purposefully against the marble floors. The usual morning bustle had a different energy today. Whispered conversations stopped as she passed, replaced by looks of admiration and respect. Ms. Mitchell. Her assistant Michael met her at her office door, tablet in hand. The press is already calling. CNN, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, they all want statements about the arrest. Send them the prepared release, Sarah instructed, setting her briefcase on her desk. And get me the latest client reaction reports. I want to know who's nervous. She had barely settled into her chair when Rachel appeared, closing the office door behind her. The FBI just finished their initial sweep of James's office. You wouldn't believe what they found. Let me guess, Sarah said, logging into her computer. A second set of books hidden in that pretentious first edition Dickens collection he kept on his shelf? Rachel's eyes widened. How did you... know? Sarah smiled. I bought him those books for our 5th anniversary. He never read them, but he loved showing them off. Perfect hiding place for someone who thought he was cleverer than everyone else. Her computer screen filled with emails, clients seeking reassurance, partners demanding explanations, reporters hunting for exclusive interviews. But Sarah had prepared for this, just as she had prepared for everything else. The partnership meeting starts in 20 minutes, Rachel reminded her. They're gathering in the main conference room. Perfect. Sarah stood, straightening her blazer. Time to show them phase 2 of the restructuring plan. The conference room was packed when Sarah entered, partners and board members filling every seat. The managing partner, Richard Montgomery, stood at the head of the table, his face grave. Sarah, he began, I think I speak for everyone when I say we're shocked by these revelations about James. Are you really, Richard? Sarah's voice was calm as she took her place at the table. Because I have documentation suggesting several partners raised concerns about his accounting practices over the past year. Concerns that were mysteriously dismissed. The room grew very quiet. Sarah opened her portfolio, extracting a stack of papers. In fact, I have emails showing that the previous compliance officer, who resigned suddenly 6 months ago, had flagged numerous irregularities in James's client accounts. She began passing copies around the table. You'll find a complete timeline here, including which partners were notified, which chose to ignore the warnings, and which actively helped conceal the problems. Richard's face had gone pale. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Sarah replied. I'm stating facts. Facts that the FBI is very interested in, by the way, but... She paused, letting the tension build. I'm also offering a solution. She produced another document, her proposal for the new compliance division. We have an opportunity here, gentlemen. We can either be the firm that harbored a fraudster, or we can be the firm that leads the industry in fraud prevention and ethical oversight. The partners exchanged nervous glances as they reviewed her proposal. Sarah continued, her voice steady. I've already spoken with our top clients. They're concerned, naturally, but they're willing to stick with us if we demonstrate real change. This new division, with its enhanced oversight protocols and ethical investment guidelines, gives us that opportunity. And I suppose you see yourself heading this new division? One of the older partners asked, his tone skeptical. Actually, Sarah smiled, I see myself as managing partner. After all, Someone needs to restore confidence in the firm's leadership. Who better than the person who exposed the fraud? She let that sink in as she distributed another document. You'll find my evidence package is quite thorough. It details not just James's crimes, but every instance where partners failed to act on red flags. The FBI has copies, of course. As does the SEC. The room erupted in overlapping voices, but Sarah held up her hand. Before you vote, consider this. By noon, every major financial publication will be running this story. The only question is whether they'll be reporting on a firm in crisis or a firm leading the charge for ethical reform in the industry. Richard slumped in his chair, defeated. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I learned from the best, Sarah replied. My husband always said I was too methodical, too careful. He thought it made me weak. Instead, it made me exactly what this firm needs right now. Sarah's first act as managing partner was to call an all-hands meeting in the firm's largest conference space. As employees filed in, their faces showed a mixture of shock, curiosity, and anticipation. The news of James's arrest had spread quickly, but few knew the full story. By now, you've all heard about James Harrison's arrest, she began, standing confidently at the podium. What you don't know is that his fraudulent activities were symptomatic of a larger problem within our culture. A problem we're going to fix. The room was silent as she outlined her vision for the firm's future. Enhanced oversight protocols, ethical investment guidelines, protected channels for reporting concerns. With each point, she could see hope replacing fear in her employees' eyes. For too long, success in this industry has been measured solely by profit margins, she continued. We're going to change that. Starting today, integrity becomes our primary metric. Her phone buzzed quietly. Another text from Jessica's father, this time offering a substantial donation to the firm's charitable foundation in exchange for leniency. Sarah ignored it, focusing instead on the faces before her. Some of you worked directly under James, she acknowledged. Some of you may have suspected something was wrong but felt powerless to speak up. That ends now. My door is open to anyone who has concerns, and I promise you'll be heard. Rachel, standing at the back of the room, gave her a subtle thumbs up. They had already identified several key employees from James's department who would be crucial in rebuilding client trust. In the coming weeks, each department will undergo a thorough review, Sarah explained, not to find fault, but to identify areas where we can strengthen our ethical foundations. We have an opportunity here to become industry leaders in corporate integrity. As if on cue, her tablet displayed a news alert. Breaking: Harrison financial fraud scandal. Firm announces revolutionary ethics reform under new leadership. The PR team had done their job perfectly, spinning the story exactly as Sarah had planned. By the time James appeared for his bail hearing this afternoon, the narrative would be firmly established, not just of his crimes, but of the firm's transformation under her guidance. One last thing, Sarah addressed the room. I know many of you are wondering about the clients James handled personally. I want to assure you that every account is being reviewed. Any irregularities will be addressed transparently and promptly. She paused, allowing her next words to carry full weight. We will not hide from our mistakes. We will learn from them, grow from them, and emerge stronger. The applause that followed wasn't just polite. It was enthusiastic, genuine. These people had lived under James's regime of fear and manipulation. Now they were being offered something different: leadership based on integrity and transparency. As the meeting concluded, Sarah noticed a young analyst lingering nearby, one of Jessica's friends, if she remembered correctly. The girl approached hesitantly. Ms. Mitchell? I knew about them, about James and Jessica. I should have said something. Sarah smiled kindly. The past is done. What matters is what we do. Moving forward. I believe you're up for a promotion review next month? The analyst nodded, surprised. Good. I'll need strong ethical leaders at every level as we rebuild. Show me what you can do." Watching the girl hurry away with renewed purpose, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction. James had never understood that true power didn't come from fear or manipulation. It came from transforming weakness into strength, betrayal into purpose. Her phone lit up with another news alert. Exclusive, inside the whistleblower case that's reshaping Wall Street. Perfect timing. Phase 1, exposing the fraud, was complete. Phase 2, transforming the firm, was underway. Now it was time for Phase 3, ensuring that James's legacy wouldn't be the millions he stole, but the reforms his crimes inspired. Sometimes, Sarah mused, the best revenge wasn't just about destroying the old, but building something better in its place. Sarah sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse, watching as James was led into his bail hearing. His expensive suit had been replaced by prison orange, his confident swagger reduced to a shuffle. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his usual trappings of power. Jessica sat several rows ahead, her designer outfit replaced by a modest maternity dress. Her father, the influential Robert Peterson, sat beside her, his usual commanding presence subdued. They both pointedly avoided looking in Sarah's direction. The defendant, James Harrison, is charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct, the prosecutor announced. Given the scope of his crimes and his access to significant resources, we request that bail be denied. James's attorney, a former colleague from the firm, stood to argue for release. Your Honor, my client has strong ties to the community. He's about to become a father. Objection. The prosecutor cut in. The defendant's personal relationships are precisely why he poses a flight risk. We have evidence he's been liquidating assets and making arrangements for offshore transfers. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Those transfers had been easy to track once she had access to James's private accounts. Access he'd unwittingly given her while trying to hide his affair. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, producing a familiar-looking file, we have documentation showing Mr. Harrison attempted to modify his prenuptial agreement through fraudulent means, presumably to protect his illegally obtained assets. James's head snapped around, his eyes finding Sarah's for the first time. She met his gaze steadily, letting him see not the trusting wife he'd betrayed, but the architect of his downfall. Your Honor, James's attorney tried again. My client can surrender his passport. The passport registered in his name, or the one he obtained under his alias. The prosecutor produced another document. We have evidence Mr. Harrison has been establishing alternate identities, complete with international banking connections. Sarah watched as James's face crumpled. He hadn't known she'd found that passport, hidden in the same safe deposit box where he'd stored Jessica's love letters and ultrasound photos. Bail denied, the judge declared. The defendant will be remanded to custody pending trial. As James was led away, Sarah stood, smoothing her skirt. She had another meeting to attend, this one with the SEC investigators who were very interested in her documentation of the firm's systemic oversight failures. Sarah, Jessica's voice called out as Sarah reached the courthouse steps. Please, you have to help him. Think about the baby. Sarah turned, studying the younger woman who had once been so confident in her victory. I am thinking about the baby, she replied calmly. I'm ensuring he grows up understanding that actions have consequences. But he'll go to prison, Jessica protested, one hand on her swollen belly. How will he support us? Perhaps, Sarah suggested. You should have considered that before helping him steal from his clients. Or did you think all those expensive gifts came from his salary? Robert Peterson stepped forward, his business smile in place. Sarah, surely we can work something out. My firm has several projects that could benefit from your expertise. Mr. Peterson, Sarah cut him off politely. Your daughter participated in financial fraud. She lived in a property purchased with stolen money. wore jewelry bought with embezzled funds, and actively helped conceal criminal activity. I suggest you focus on finding her a good criminal defense attorney. As she descended the courthouse steps, Sarah heard Jessica burst into tears. But her mind was already moving forward, reviewing her notes for the SEC meeting. James's arrest was just the beginning. The real work of reforming the industry was still ahead. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Board approved the new compliance protocols. Implementation starts tomorrow. Perfect. Phase 4 of her plan was ready to launch. James had taught her the mechanisms of fraud. Now she would use that knowledge to prevent others from following his path. The car service was waiting to take her to the SEC offices. As Sarah settled into the back seat, she allowed herself a moment to appreciate how far she'd come from that night 3 months ago, when she'd first discovered James's betrayal. He had thought her too soft for the cutthroat world of high finance. Now he would watch from a prison cell as she transformed that world, using his crimes as a blueprint for reform. Sometimes, she reflected, the best revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about turning betrayal into positive change. To the SEC offices, she instructed the driver, opening her briefcase to review her presentation one last time. Today, she would begin reshaping not just her firm, but the entire industry's approach to ethical oversight. James had wanted to leave her with nothing. Instead, he had given her everything she needed to build something revolutionary. Sometimes the worst betrayals led to the most powerful transformations. The SEC's offices were a stark contrast to her firm's luxurious environment, all fluorescent lights and government-issue furniture. But Sarah felt perfectly at home as she laid out her evidence before the investigators. As you can see, she explained, pointing to a complex flowchart, James didn't just commit isolated incidents of fraud. He created an entire system of financial manipulation, one that exploited weaknesses in standard oversight protocols. The lead investigator, Agent Martinez, leaned forward with interest. And you documented all of this while maintaining your cover as an unsuspecting spouse? I learned from the best, Sarah replied with a hint of irony. James always said I was too detail-oriented, too focused on documentation. He never realized those qualities would be his undoing. She proceeded to walk them through the elaborate web of shell companies, hidden accounts, and falsified records that James had constructed. Each revelation drew murmurs of appreciation from the assembled investigators. "This is extraordinary work, Ms. Mitchell," Agent Martinez commented. "But what I'm most interested in is your proposal for preventing similar frauds in the future." Sarah smiled, pulling out another document. "That's where the real opportunity lies. You see, James didn't just show me how to commit fraud. He showed me exactly how to stop it." For the next hour, she outlined her comprehensive reform proposal: enhanced verification protocols, AI-powered transaction monitoring, new ethical oversight, committees, all designed based on her intimate knowledge of how James had circumvented existing systems. "The problem isn't just individual bad actors," she explained. "It's a culture that enables them. By studying how James manipulated the system, we can build better safeguards." Her phone buzzed, another news alert about the case. The story had evolved beyond the salacious details of James's affair to focus on the broader implications for financial industry reform. "There's something else you should see," Sarah said, producing a final file. Evidence suggesting James wasn't acting alone. Several other firms appear to be using similar fraud techniques. Agent Martinez's eyebrows rose. "You're saying this is systemic?" "I'm saying we have an opportunity to tackle industry-wide issues," Sarah corrected. "James's case can be the catalyst for meaningful change." As the meeting concluded, Agent Martinez pulled Sarah aside. "You know, most people in your position would have just taken revenge. You're building reform instead." "Why not both?" Sarah replied with a slight smile. "The best revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about creating positive change that lasts." Leaving the SEC offices, Sarah checked her messages. The firm's stock had initially dropped after James's arrest, but was now rising as news of her reform initiatives spread. Investors, it seemed, appreciated a commitment to ethical practice. Rachel had sent multiple updates. The new compliance protocols were being implemented ahead of schedule, client confidence was stabilizing, and industry peers were reaching out to learn more about their reforms. Even Jessica had sent a message, though Sarah didn't bother reading it. The girl would learn soon enough that actions had consequences, a lesson Sarah herself had learned all too well. Her driver was waiting, with fresh coffee and the afternoon schedule, 3 media interviews, a client conference call, and a meeting with the firm's new ethics committee. The work of transformation was never done. To the office, she instructed, already reviewing her notes for the next meeting. James had tried to destroy her, but he had only succeeded in revealing her true strength. The city streets flew by as Sarah contemplated her next moves. Phase 5 would involve expanding the reforms beyond her firm, creating industry-wide standards for ethical practice. Her phone lit up with another call from James's lawyer, probably another attempt at negotiation. Sarah declined it without a second thought. The time for negotiations had passed the moment she discovered his betrayal. Now was the time for transformation, for turning personal pain into professional progress. James had taught her more than he realized about the mechanics of power. Those lessons would reshape not just her life, but an entire industry. The media interviews went exactly as Sarah had planned. She steered the conversation away from the scandal's personal aspects, focusing instead on the broader implications for industry reform. "This isn't just about one man's betrayal," she told the Forbes reporter. "It's about transforming how we approach financial oversight. Every broken trust becomes an opportunity to build something better." CNN's business correspondent was particularly interested in her journey from wronged wife to industry reformer. "What made you decide to go beyond simple revenge?" "Understanding that real power isn't about destruction," Sarah replied. "It's about transformation. James showed me every weakness in our current system. Now I'm using that knowledge to strengthen it." Between interviews, Rachel brought updates from the office. The ethics committee had already identified 3 other potential fraud cases using Sarah's new protocols. Client confidence was steadily rising as news of their enhanced oversight measures spread. "The Singapore office called," Rachel reported. "They want to implement our new compliance system immediately. Tokyo and London, too." Sarah nodded, reviewing the latest draft of her industry reform proposal. "Schedule video conferences with all international branches. This transformation needs to be global." Her phone buzzed with a message from Jessica's attorney, another attempt at negotiation. The girl was finally realizing that her pregnancy wouldn't shield her from consequences. "Ms. Mitchell?" Her assistant Michael appeared. "The U.S. Attorney's office is on line 1. They want to discuss your testimony for the grand jury." Sarah took the call, her voice steady as she outlined what she knew about James's crimes. She had spent 3 months gathering evidence, and now each piece would serve its purpose in ensuring justice. "The prosecution is prepared to offer a deal," the U.S. Attorney said. "If Mr. Harrison cooperates, provides information about other potential frauds." "He won't," Sarah interrupted confidently. "James still believes he can charm his way out of this. Let him face the full weight of his actions." After the call, Sarah stood by her office window, watching the city bustle below. The woman reflected in the glass bore little resemblance to the trusting wife she'd been just months ago. That woman had been blindsided by betrayal. This one had turned betrayal into strength. Her calendar reminder chimed. Time for the client conference call. Major investors were understandably concerned after James's arrest, but Sarah had prepared for this too. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began the call, "what happened at our firm wasn't just a failure of one man's ethics. It was a failure of systems designed to prevent such abuse. Today, I want to show you how we're fixing those systems. For the next hour, she outlined their new approach to ethical oversight. Each point was illustrated with examples drawn from James's schemes, transformed into prevention strategies. In essence, she concluded, we're not just promising to do better. We're showing you exactly how we'll prevent fraud, protect investments, and restore trust. The client's response was overwhelmingly positive. By the end of the call, 3 major investors had increased their holdings in the firm. The story's everywhere, Rachel reported, showing Sarah the latest headlines. They're calling you a pioneer in financial industry reform. Sarah smiled slightly. James always said I was too methodical, too focused on details. He never understood that those qualities would be his undoing. The ethics committee was waiting in the conference room, ready to review more potential cases. Sarah gathered her materials, ready to continue the work of transformation. Her phone showed another missed call from James's lawyer, along with a text from Jessica begging for intervention. Sarah ignored both. She had learned that sometimes the kindest response was allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. The FBI found more evidence in James's private accounts, Rachel mentioned as they walked to the meeting. They're saying this could be one of the largest fraud cases in recent history. Good, Sarah replied calmly. The bigger the case, the more attention our reforms will receive. Sometimes the worst betrayals create the best opportunities for change. 6 weeks after James's arrest, Sarah stood at the podium of a major financial industry conference, addressing a room full of executives and regulators. The title of her presentation glowed on the screen behind her. From Fraud to Reform. Transforming. Financial oversight. Every system has vulnerabilities, she began, her voice carrying confidently through the packed auditorium. The question isn't whether someone will try to exploit them, but how we prevent, detect, and respond when they do. The audience, initially drawn by the scandal's notoriety, was now captivated by her systematic approach to reform. Sarah clicked to her next slide, showing a complex diagram of James's fraud methodology. This is how one person manipulated multiple oversight systems, she explained. Notice the pattern. Each legitimate procedure became a potential tool for deception. But within every exploitation technique lies the blueprint for prevention. In the front row, she spotted Agent Martinez from the SEC, nodding appreciatively. Their collaboration had expanded beyond James's case to identify similar patterns across the industry. The traditional approach to financial oversight is reactive, Sarah continued. We wait for crimes to occur, then patch the specific vulnerabilities exposed. But what if we could predict and prevent fraud by understanding the psychology behind it? Her phone buzzed silently. Another update from Rachel. The firm's new compliance protocols had just caught another potential fraud attempt, this time in their London office. The system was working exactly as designed. This isn't just theory, Sarah told her audience. In the 6 weeks since implementing these reforms, our firm has identified and prevented 12 potential fraud attempts. More importantly, we've created a culture where ethical concerns are raised before they become criminal actions. The presentation screens shifted to show the results: client confidence rates, investment returns, employee satisfaction metrics. Every indicator showed positive growth since the reforms began. But perhaps the most significant change, Sarah noted, is in how we view corporate culture itself. When we prioritize integrity over immediate profit, when we reward ethical behavior rather than just financial results, we create sustainable success. From the back of the room, she noticed Jessica slipping in, trying to be inconspicuous despite her now prominent pregnancy. Sarah continued without missing a beat, though she noted how the younger woman's designer outfit had been replaced by something more modest. The true cost of financial fraud isn't just monetary, Sarah emphasized. It's the erosion of trust, the destruction of relationships, the corruption of entire systems. But within each betrayal lies the seed of transformation. The audience was entirely engaged now, taking notes as Sarah outlined her comprehensive approach to industry reform. Her methods were already being adopted by other major firms, creating a ripple effect through the financial sector. 3 months ago, she concluded, I discovered my husband's betrayal. But instead of being destroyed by it, I chose to understand it, to document it, to transform it into something powerful and positive. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. As Sarah stepped away from the podium, industry leaders crowded around, eager to discuss implementing her reforms in their own organizations. Remarkable presentation, Agent Martinez commented, approaching through the crowd. The Bureau would like you to consult on other major fraud cases. Your insight into the psychology of financial deception is invaluable. Sarah checked her phone. Another message from James's lawyer. The prosecution had offered a plea deal, but James was still refusing to cooperate, convinced he could somehow charm his way out of consequences. Ms. Mitchell? A timid voice interrupted. Jessica stood nearby, her confidence completely eroded. Can we talk? Please? The baby is due in 2 months, Sarah finished for her. I know, just like I know you've been selling your designer goods to pay legal fees. Actions have consequences, Jessica. That's the lesson here. Turning back to Agent Martinez, Sarah pulled out another file. You'll want to see this. Evidence suggesting similar fraud patterns in 3 other major firms. The industry reformation is just beginning. Her phone lit up with another news alert. Financial reform pioneer Sarah Mitchell, nominated for Industry Leadership Award. The transformation from victim to victor was complete, but Sarah knew the real work was just beginning. Schedule a meeting. With the Ethics Committee, she instructed Rachel via text. It's time to implement Phase 6 of our reforms. Looking out over the crowd of financial leaders eager to learn from her experience, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. James had thought he was destroying her. Instead, he had created someone far more powerful. A woman who The prosecution's evidence against James was overwhelming, but Sarah found herself focusing more on the future than the past as she prepared for another day of industry transformation. Her office, once filled with photos of her life with James, now displayed awards and recognition for her corporate reform initiatives. The Tokyo office implementation is complete, Rachel reported, entering with the morning briefing. They've already flagged 2 suspicious transaction patterns using your protocols. Sarah nodded, reviewing the latest data on her tablet. Have them cross-reference those patterns with our global database. James's techniques might have inspired others. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jessica's father. Another attempt at negotiation. The Peterson family's real estate empire was crumbling under scrutiny, their questionable practices exposed by the ripple effect of James's investigation. Ms. Mitchell? Michael appeared at her door. The Ethics Committee is ready for this morning's review, and Time magazine is online too about the Women in Leadership feature. Before Sarah could respond, Rachel's tablet chimed with an urgent alert. You need to see this, she said, passing the device over. James is trying to make a deal. The message detailed James's offer, full cooperation in exposing other industry fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering how he had once mocked her methodical nature. Tell the prosecutors no deal, she instructed. We already have everything we need. James is just realizing how thoroughly I documented his activities. The morning's Ethics Committee meeting revealed the expanding impact of their reforms. 3 more firms had adopted Sarah's oversight protocols, and industry regulators were considering making them standard practice. The prevention metrics are exceptional, the head of compliance reported. We're stopping fraud attempts before they can take root. Sarah's attention was drawn to a particular case file, another investment manager using techniques similar to James's. Send this to Agent Martinez, she directed. It fits the pattern we've been tracking. Through her office windows, she could see Jessica leaving the building after another failed attempt at meeting. The younger woman's pregnancy was now very visible, her due date approaching quickly. She's been trying to sell her story to the media, Rachel mentioned, following Sarah's gaze. But our documentation of her role in the fraud makes publishers nervous. Sarah turned back to her work. She made her choices. Now she learns what it means to face consequences without a safety net. The afternoon brought a series of international video conferences as more firms sought to implement Sarah's reforms. Each presentation refined her message: integrity as a business asset, transparency as a strength. The industry is changing, she told the CEO of a major European bank. We can either lead that change or be forced into it by scandal. Which would you prefer? Her phone lit up with another news alert. Harrison fraud case expands, multiple firms implicated. The investigation she had started was growing, exposing systemic issues throughout the financial sector. Your 3 o'clock is here, Michael announced, the Harvard Business School team wanting to create a case study about our reforms. Sarah gathered her materials, including the detailed documentation of how she had transformed her own tragedy into industry-wide change. Tell them we'll focus on the systemic improvements, not the personal drama. As she prepared for the meeting, she noticed James's name trending on financial news sites. His attempt at a deal had leaked, making him appear even more desperate and manipulative. Should we release a statement? Rachel asked, monitoring the coverage. No need, Sarah replied. Let him learn what it feels like to have no control over his narrative. The Harvard team was particularly interested in how Sarah had turned her personal betrayal into professional triumph. She showed them the progression, from discovering James's fraud to implementing industry-wide reforms. The key was understanding that revenge alone wouldn't create lasting change, she explained. Real power comes from transformation, from building something better out of betrayal. Her phone buzzed with another update. The SEC was forming a task, forced to implement her oversight protocols across the industry. Everything she had built from the ashes of James's betrayal was becoming standard practice. Your story is remarkable, one of the professors commented. You've turned personal pain into industry-wide progress. Sarah smiled, thinking of how James had dismissed her as too soft for the corporate world. Sometimes the people who try to break you just reveal how strong you really are. 2 months after the industry conference, Sarah sat in her expanded corner office, reviewing the latest implementation reports of her reform protocols. The view had changed, not just the literal one from her window, but her perspective on everything. The city's financial district represented. Final numbers from Q3, Rachel announced, entering with a thick folder. Fraud prevention up 200%, client trust metrics at record highs, and 3 more firms adopting our oversight system. Sarah nodded, scanning the data that proved her transformation of the industry was working. Her phone buzzed, a news alert about James's case. His trial was approaching, and his attempts at deals had grown increasingly desperate. Ms. Mitchell? Michael appeared at her door. There's a situation in the lobby. Jessica's gone into labor and she's demanding to see you. Sarah checked her watch, considering. After a moment, she stood. Have security escort her to the medical center next door, and call her father. He should know his grandchild is coming. The decision wasn't born of sympathy, but of strategy. Every move in this complex game of consequences had to be carefully calculated. The press will be all over this, Rachel warned, already monitoring social media alerts. Good, Sarah replied. Let them see how we handle it. Compassion and accountability aren't mutually exclusive. Her phone lit up with another call from James's lawyer. This time, she answered. Unless you're calling to accept full responsibility for your client's actions, we have nothing to discuss. Sarah, please, the lawyer began. James is willing to make a full confession, provide details about other firms involved. You mean the details we already have? Sarah interrupted smoothly. The ones I've spent months documenting and verifying? Tell James his opportunity for deals expired the moment I found those forged signatures. Ending the call, she turned to Rachel. Release Phase 7 of the documentation. Let's show everyone exactly how deep this fraud network goes. Within hours, the story had evolved beyond James's personal betrayal to expose an entire system of financial manipulation. Sarah's methodical investigation had uncovered connections between multiple firms, all using similar fraudulent techniques. The SEC is calling it the most significant financial reform case in decades, Rachel reported, showing Sarah the latest headlines. Through her office windows, Sarah could see news vans gathering outside the medical center where Jessica was in labor. The timing was perfect. A new life coming into the world, just as the old systems of corruption were being dismantled. Your testimony before Congress is confirmed for next week, Michael reminded her. They want you to present your reform proposals to the Banking Oversight Committee. Sarah reviewed her presentation materials, each slide showing how personal betrayal had been transformed into systemic change. James had taught her more than he realized about the mechanics of financial manipulation. Now those lessons would reshape regulatory policy. Ms. Mitchell? A young analyst appeared, clutching a folder. We've identified another pattern matching Mr. Harrison's fraud techniques in the Asian markets. Send it to Agent Martinez, Sarah instructed, and copy the International Oversight Committee. The reforms need to be global. Her phone buzzed with a message from the medical center. Jessica had delivered a healthy baby boy. Sarah felt no emotion at the news, only a clinical satisfaction that everything was proceeding according to plan. Should we send flowers? Rachel asked carefully. Send a copy of the trial documents instead, Sarah replied. Let it be a reminder that every child deserves parents who understand integrity. The afternoon brought more validation of her reforms. 3 major investment banks had adopted her oversight protocols, and regulatory agencies were studying her methods for industry-wide implementation. They're calling you the new face of ethical finance, Rachel mentioned, showing her the latest magazine cover. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's dismissive words about her being too soft for the corporate world. He had never understood. That true strength came from integrity, not manipulation. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow, she instructed. It's time to announce the next phase of our industry reforms. Looking out over the city skyline, Sarah reflected on how far she'd come from that night of discovery. James had tried to destroy her through betrayal, but had instead created something far more powerful, a woman capable of transforming an entire industry. Her phone lit up with another update. James's attempt at a plea deal had been rejected. He would face the full consequences of his actions, just as Sarah had planned. Sarah's testimony before Congress was more than just a presentation. It was the culmination of her transformation from betrayed wife to industry reformer. The Banking Oversight Committee chamber was packed with legislators, regulators, and media representatives. Financial fraud isn't just about numbers, she began, her voice steady and authoritative. It's about trust. When that trust is broken, we have 2 choices: remain victims or become agents of change. The committee members leaned forward, captivated by her systematic breakdown of how fraud occurred and, more importantly, how it could be prevented. Sarah clicked through slides showing James's methodology, now transformed into prevention protocols. What we've created isn't just a detection system, she explained. It's a complete reformation of how we approach financial oversight. Every vulnerability James Harrison exploited has become a checkpoint for prevention. Senator Williams, known for his aggressive questioning of financial executives, seemed particularly impressed. Ms. Mitchell, your reforms have already prevented millions in potential fraud. How did you develop such a comprehensive system so quickly? By understanding that betrayal is a teacher, Sarah replied. When someone shows you how they abuse trust, they also show you exactly how to stop them. Her phone buzzed silently, a message from Rachel. Jessica had been released from the hospital with her newborn son. The press was having a field day with the timing, a new life beginning as James faced decades in prison. Our implementation data shows a 300% increase in early fraud detection, Sarah continued, displaying the metrics. But more importantly, we're seeing a cultural shift. Employees feel empowered to report concerns before they become crimes. Through the chamber's windows, she could see protesters gathered outside, not opposing her reforms, but demanding they be implemented more widely. Public sentiment had shifted dramatically since James's arrest. The traditional approach to financial oversight is reactive, she told the committee. We wait for crimes to occur, then patch specific vulnerabilities. My system reverses that approach. We predict and prevent based on understanding how fraud evolves. Her phone lit up with another update. James had finally signed a full confession, realizing his attempts at deals were futile. Sarah had known he would break eventually. Men like James couldn't handle losing control of their narrative. Ms. Mitchell, Congresswoman Chen interjected, your personal connection to this case is well known. How do you maintain objectivity while implementing these reforms? Sarah smiled slightly. By recognizing that personal pain can fuel professional progress. Every detail I documented about James's betrayal became a building block for systemic change. The questioning continued, for hours. But Sarah was perfectly prepared. She had transformed her trauma into expertise, her anger into authority. Each committee member's challenge was met with data, evidence, and clear solutions. The financial industry stands at a crossroads, she concluded. We can continue with systems we know are vulnerable, or we can embrace comprehensive reform. The choice seems clear. As the session ended, Sarah's phone buzzed with messages from industry leaders eager to implement her protocols. The committee's public endorsement would accelerate adoption of her reforms. The vote on mandatory implementation is scheduled for next month, Rachel reported as they left the Capitol. After your testimony, it's expected to pass unanimously. Sarah nodded, reviewing the latest data from firms already using her system. Each prevented fraud attempt validated her approach. Transformation was more powerful than revenge. Ms. Mitchell, reporters called out as she descended the Capitol steps. Any comment on James Harrison's confession? On the birth of his child? My focus is on the future, she replied calmly. On ensuring that trust, once broken, becomes the foundation for something stronger. In the car heading back to her hotel, Sarah reviewed messages from Agent Martinez. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was using her documentation methods to uncover similar fraud patterns across the industry. James's lawyer called again, Rachel mentioned. He's requesting one final meeting before sentencing. Sarah declined the call without hesitation. He had his chance for honesty. Now he faces the consequences of choosing deception. Looking out at the Washington skyline, Sarah reflected on how far she'd come. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had transformed. An entire industry, his betrayal, meant to destroy her, had instead created something revolutionary. Schedule the International Regulatory Committee for tomorrow, she instructed Rachel. It's time to take these reforms global. Her phone showed another news alert. Mitchell reforms set to become industry standard. James's sentencing day arrived with a media frenzy outside the federal courthouse. Sarah sat in the gallery, poised and professional in a navy suit that spoke of authority rather than victimhood. The past months had transformed her from a woman, shattered by betrayal, into an architect of industry-wide change. The defendant's crimes represent an extraordinary breach of trust, the prosecutor stated, presenting the final evidence, not just of his marriage, but of his professional obligations and fiduciary duties. Sarah watched as James shifted uncomfortably in his prison oranges. Gone was the confident man who had dismissed her as too soft for the corporate world. In his place sat someone broken by the very attention to detail he had once mocked. The prosecution wishes to enter one final piece of evidence, the prosecutor announced. A comprehensive analysis of Mr. Harrison's fraud methodology, documented by Sarah Mitchell, and now being used to prevent similar crimes across the industry. James's head snapped up at this, his eyes finding Sarah's for the first time since his arrest. She met his gaze steadily, letting him see not the wife he had betrayed, but the reformer who had emerged from that betrayal. "Your Honor," James's attorney began, "my client wishes to express his remorse." "Objection," the prosecutor cut in. "The defendant's recent confession came only after multiple failed attempts at deals and manipulation. This shows a pattern of continuing deception." Sarah's phone buzzed quietly. Another update from Rachel. The firm's implementation of her oversight protocols had just prevented a major fraud attempt in their Dubai office. The system was working exactly as designed. "Mr. Harrison," the judge addressed James directly, "your crimes show a calculated pattern of deception and manipulation. But perhaps most telling is how your methods, once exposed, have become the foundation for preventing similar frauds." Through the courtroom windows, Sarah could see Jessica arriving with the baby. The young woman had aged years in months, her designer confidence replaced by the harsh reality of consequences. Before pronouncing sentence, the judge continued, "I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work Ms. Mitchell has done in transforming personal betrayal into industry-wide reform. Her response to victimization has set new standards for corporate oversight." Sarah maintained her composure as the judge detailed James's sentence. 20 years in federal prison, full restitution of stolen funds, and permanent barring from the financial industry. It was exactly what she had predicted when she first discovered his betrayal. "Ms. Mitchell," the judge added, "the court commends your contribution to financial industry reform. You've shown that true strength lies not in revenge, but in transformation." James was led away in handcuffs. Sarah gathered her materials. Her phone showed messages from industry leaders worldwide, all eager to implement her protocols. The sentencing was just another step in her larger mission. "Sarah!" Jessica's voice called out as Sarah reached the courthouse steps. "Please, he wants to see his son." "That's not my concern," Sarah replied calmly. "Just like it wasn't your concern when you helped him steal from his clients. Focus on teaching your child about integrity. It's something both his parents failed to understand." The media swarmed, cameras flashing, but Sarah was already moving toward her next meeting. The SEC was convening a special session to discuss making her reforms mandatory across all financial institutions. The European Union Financial Oversight Committee called, Rachel reported as they entered the car. "They want to fast-track implementation of your protocols." Sarah nodded, reviewing the latest data on her tablet. Each prevented fraud, each strengthened system, each reformed institution validated her approach. James had tried to break her, but had instead created something unbreakable. "Your mother called," Rachel added softly. "She wanted to know if you're okay with the sentencing and everything." "I'm better than okay," Sarah replied, watching the courthouse recede in the rear window. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Her phone displayed another news alert. "Harrison sentencing marks new era in financial oversight." The story wasn't about James anymore. It was about the reforms his crimes had inspired. "Schedule the board meeting for tomorrow," she instructed. "Rachel, it's time to implement the final phase of our global oversight protocols." Looking out at the city skyline, Sarah reflected on her transformation. The woman James had betrayed no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had turned personal pain into professional revolution. "Sometimes," she mused, "the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about building something they never thought you capable of creating." 1 year to the day after Jessica had appeared on her doorstep, Sarah stood in her expanded office suite, reviewing the global impact of her reforms. The wall of windows now overlooked not just the city, but a transformed financial landscape. "Final numbers for the year," Rachel announced, entering with comprehensive reports. Fraud prevention rates up 400% globally, client trust at historic highs, and your protocol's now standard practice in 27 countries. Sarah nodded, scanning the data that validated everything she had built from the ashes of betrayal. Her phone buzzed. Another article about how her reforms had revolutionized financial oversight. Ms. Mitchell? Michael appeared. The International Ethics Committee is ready for your keynote address, and Time magazine sent the final draft of your Person of the Year profile. The timing was perfect. 1 year ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's betrayal. Now she was being celebrated as the architect of global financial reform. Jessica sent another letter, Rachel mentioned carefully. She's working at a small accounting firm now, trying to rebuild her life. The baby file. It with the others, Sarah interrupted. Her journey toward redemption is her own responsibility. Her phone lit up with updates from Agent Martinez. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had just prevented another major fraud attempt using her protocols. The system she had built from studying James's deception was working flawlessly. The Harvard Business Review piece is out, Rachel reported, pulling up the article. From Personal Betrayal to Professional Revolution, How Sarah Mitchell Transformed Financial Oversight. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's dismissive words about her being too methodical, too focused on details. Those same qualities had now made her one of the most influential figures in global finance. The Senate Banking Committee called, Michael added. They want you to chair the new Oversight Commission, and the European Union is fast-tracking implementation of your reforms. Through her office windows, Sarah could see the changes in the financial district. Firms that had once operated in ethical gray areas were now models of transparency, their practices transformed by her protocols. Your next appointment is here, Rachel announced. Another firm wanting to implement the Mitchell standards. Sarah gathered her materials, each document representing a piece of the system she had built from understanding James's manipulation techniques. His betrayal had taught her exactly how to prevent others from following his path. Ms. Mitchell, the visiting CEO began, what you've created goes beyond fraud prevention. You've changed how we think about corporate integrity. Understanding betrayal, Sarah replied, means understanding how to build something stronger in its place. Her phone showed another news alert. Mitchell reforms prevent billion-dollar fraud attempt. The transformation she had engineered was having impacts beyond anything James could have imagined when he thought he was destroying her. The divorce is finally official, Rachel mentioned as the day wound down. Legal just delivered the papers. Sarah signed without hesitation. The woman who had been James Harrison's wife no longer existed. In her place was someone far more powerful, a woman who had transformed personal pain into global change. Schedule the International Regulatory Conference, she instructed. It's time to implement the next phase of our reforms. Looking out over the city lights, Sarah reflected on her journey. 1 year ago, a pregnant mistress had appeared at her door, thinking she was delivering a crushing blow. Instead, she had sparked a revolution. Your mother called, Rachel said softly. She wanted to know if you're doing anything to mark the anniversary. I am, Sarah replied, reviewing the latest implementation data. I'm watching everything James tried to destroy become the foundation for something he never could have built. Her phone displayed another headline. Mitchell Standards Now Global Benchmark for Financial Ethics. The transformation was complete, but its impact would continue to ripple through the industry. Sometimes, she mused, watching the sunset paint, the city in shades of possibility. The best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. About building something so significant that the betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. The office lights dimmed automatically, but Sarah remained at her window, contemplating the empire of integrity she had built from the ruins of betrayal. James had tried to break her spirit, but had instead unleashed something revolutionary. Tomorrow's schedule? She asked Rachel. Board meeting at 9. then the Global Ethics Committee, followed by your keynote at the International Finance Summit. Sarah nodded, gathering her things. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of industry-wide transformation. His betrayal, meant to destroy her, had instead created something unprecedented, a new era of financial oversight built on the very qualities he had mocked. 18 months after that fateful anniversary night, Sarah sat in the green room at CNBC, preparing for a live interview about the global impact of her reforms. The makeup artist was making final touches while Rachel reviewed the latest statistics. Fraud. Prevention rates continuing to climb, Rachel reported. The Mitchell standards have now been adopted in over 40 countries. The World Economic Forum is calling it the most significant financial reform in modern history. Sarah nodded, checking her reflection. The woman in the mirror bore little resemblance to James's too-soft wife. This woman radiated authority, confidence, and the kind of power that came from transforming an entire industry. 5 minutes to air, Ms. Mitchell, a producer called out. We'll start with the impact of your reforms, then touch on the personal story that inspired them. Her phone buzzed with a message from Agent Martinez. Another major fraud ring had been uncovered using her protocols, this one spanning 3 continents. The system she had built by studying James's deception was now dismantling criminal enterprises worldwide. Jessica's story is in the tabloids, Rachel mentioned, showing Sarah the headline. From Mistress to McDonald's, Harrison affair partner, struggles after scandal. Not our concern, Sarah replied calmly. She chose her path, just like James chose his. Now they both understand what real consequences feel like. The interview began with impressive statistics. Billions in prevented fraud, thousands of potential crimes stopped before they could start. A complete transformation of how the financial industry approached ethics and oversight. But what's most remarkable, the interviewer noted, is how you turned such a personal betrayal into such widespread positive change. Did you ever imagine your husband's affair would lead to this? I imagine it's not what he imagined either, Sarah responded, with a slight smile. Sometimes people who try to destroy you just show you what you're capable of building. Her phone lit up with messages as the interview aired. Industry leaders praising her insights, regulators confirming the success of her protocols, universities requesting case studies of her methods. The prison called, Rachel whispered during a commercial break. James is requesting another meeting. He says he has information about other fraud schemes. Tell them what we always tell them, Sarah instructed. Any information he has is already documented in our systems. He can't manipulate his way out of consequences anymore. The interview continued, focusing on the future of financial oversight. Sarah outlined her vision for expanding the reforms, ensuring that trust and transparency became permanent fixtures in global finance. Your story has inspired so many people, the interviewer commented, especially women who've faced similar betrayals. What advice would you give them? Don't focus on revenge, Sarah replied. Focus on revolution. Understanding how someone betrayed you means understanding exactly how to stop them, and others like them, from ever doing it again. Through the studio windows, she could see Times Square, where her interview was being broadcast on massive screens. The woman James had tried to destroy was now literally larger than life, her influence reshaping global finance. The European Central Bank confirmed their implementation timeline, Rachel reported as they left the studio. Your protocols will be standard practice across the EU by next quarter. Sarah checked her schedule. Meetings with regulatory bodies, keynote speeches at financial summits, consulting sessions with firms implementing her reforms. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead launched an unprecedented career. Your mother sent a photo, Rachel added softly. James Jr.'s first birthday party. Jessica's parents hosted it since she's still struggling financially. Sarah glanced at the image without emotion. The baby looked like James, but that wasn't her concern. Her focus was on ensuring the world he grew up in had better protections against people like his parents. The Senate Oversight Committee called. Rachel continued. They want you to testify about expanding the reforms to cover cryptocurrency and digital assets. Looking out the car window at the city passing by, Sarah reflected on how far she'd come. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal 18 months ago would never have imagined becoming a global leader in financial reform. Schedule. The committee hearing, she instructed, and set up meetings with our blockchain analysis team. The next phase of reforms needs to be ready. Her phone showed another headline. Mitchell standards prevent $5 billion in potential fraud. The transformation she had engineered was having impacts beyond anything James could have imagined when he thought he was destroying her. Sarah's keynote address at the World Economic Forum marked another milestone in her transformation from betrayed wife to global financial reformer. The Grand Hall in Davos was packed with world leaders, industry titans, and media representatives, all eager to hear from the woman who had revolutionized financial oversight. 2 years ago, she began, her voice carrying confidently through the hall, I discovered my husband's betrayal through his financial deception. Today, that discovery has become the foundation for protecting trillions in global assets. The audience was captivated as she outlined the evolution of her reforms. Each slide showed how understanding one man's manipulation had led to preventing countless others from following his path. The Mitchell standards aren't just about catching fraud, she explained. They're about transforming how we think about trust, accountability, and corporate integrity. Her phone buzzed silently. Another update from Rachel. The latest implementation of her protocols had just uncovered a major fraud attempt at a Swiss bank. The system was working exactly as designed. Ms. Mitchell, a prominent CEO asked during the Q&A, your reforms have been called the most significant change in financial oversight since the Great Depression. Did you anticipate this level of impact? I anticipated that understanding betrayal would show us how to prevent it, Sarah replied. The scale of the impact simply shows how necessary these changes were. Through the conference center windows, she could see protesters, not opposing her reforms, but demanding their expansion to other industries. The Mitchell standards had become a symbol of corporate accountability. Your protocols have prevented over $50 billion in potential fraud, another executive noted. How does that compare to the amount your ex-husband stole? Sarah smiled slightly. James Harrison's crimes were relatively small in financial terms, but he taught me something invaluable, how people who think they're above the rules actually operate. Her phone displayed a news alert. Jessica had given an interview to a small local paper, lamenting how her life had changed since the scandal. Once a confident mistress in designer clothes, she now worked retail and lived with her parents. The personal aspect of your story resonates with many people, a journalist commented. How do you view your ex-husband and his mistress now? I don't, Sarah answered simply. They're footnotes in a much larger story about transforming an industry. Their choices led to consequences. My choice led to change. After the keynote, Sarah met with international regulators eager to expand implementation of her reforms. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates about new fraud attempts prevented, new institutions adopting her protocols. James's appeal was denied, Rachel reported as they moved between meetings. He's tried claiming your reforms were based on privileged information from your marriage. Sarah shook her head slightly. He still doesn't understand. Everything I built came from documenting his betrayal, not from any confidences he shared. The afternoon brought a series of high-level discussions about expanding the Mitchell standards to emerging markets. Each conversation confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The UN Financial Oversight Committee is ready to move forward, Rachel announced. They want to make your protocols the global standard for all financial institutions. Sarah reviewed the proposal on her tablet, each page representing another step in the transformation she had engineered. James had thought he was destroying her life. Instead, he had inspired her to remake an entire industry. Your next appointment is here, Rachel continued. The tech industry representatives wanting to adapt your reforms for cryptocurrency oversight. Through the conference center's panoramic windows, Sarah could see the Swiss Alps gleaming in the distance. The view reminded her of a ski trip with James years ago, where he had mockingly called her too cautious on the slopes. Sometimes, she mused, the people who underestimate you give you the greatest opportunity to prove them wrong. Her phone showed another headline. Mitchell standards now required for international banking licenses. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken the old system of financial oversight, replacing it with something stronger. The G20 financial ministers are waiting, Rachel reminded her. They want to discuss making your reforms mandatory for all member nations. Sarah gathered her materials, each document representing a piece of the revolution she had built from understanding James's deception. His attempt to destroy her had instead created something unprecedented. A new era of global financial accountability. 3 years to the day after Jessica had appeared on her doorstep, Sarah stood in her penthouse office at the newly renamed Mitchell Global Compliance Group. The view from the top floor of Manhattan's newest skyscraper offered a perfect perspective on the empire she had built from betrayal. Final numbers for the third quarter, Rachel announced, entering with the latest reports. The Mitchell standards have prevented over $100 billion in fraud attempts worldwide. We're now the leading authority in financial compliance and oversight. Sarah nodded, reviewing the data that validated her transformation from victim to visionary. Her phone buzzed. Another profile piece, this one from Forbes. How Sarah Mitchell turned personal betrayal into professional revolution. Ms. Mitchell, Michael appeared. The International Board is assembled for the annual review, and the Nobel Committee sent their preliminary inquiries about your nomination for the Economics Prize. The timing was poetic. 3 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was being considered for one of the world's highest honors for transforming global finance. There's a visitor in reception, Rachel mentioned carefully. Jessica Peterson. She's requesting a meeting. Says it's about James Jr.'s future. Have security escort her out, Sarah replied calmly. Her choices shaped her son's future long ago, just like James's choices shaped his. Her phone lit up with updates from Agent Martinez. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division, now using her protocols exclusively, had just prevented the largest fraud attempt in banking history. The Wall Street Journal piece is out, Rachel reported, displaying the article. Mitchell Standards. How one woman's response to betrayal created a new era in global finance. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's dismissive attitude toward her attention to detail. Those same qualities had now made her the most influential figure in financial oversight. The United Nations panel confirmed, Michael added. They want you to lead the new Global Financial Ethics Commission, and the World Bank is fast-tracking universal adoption of your protocols. Through her office windows, Sarah could see the changed skyline of the financial district. Firms that had once operated in shadows now proudly displayed their Mitchell Standard certification, their practices transformed by her reforms. Your next appointment is here, Rachel announced. The tech billionaire wanting to implement the Mitchell Standards in artificial intelligence development. Sarah gathered her materials, each document representing another piece of the system she had built from understanding James's manipulation techniques. His betrayal had taught her exactly how to prevent others from following his path. Ms. Mitchell, the tech mogul began, what you've created goes beyond finance. You've developed a universal framework for ethical oversight. Understanding betrayal, Sarah replied, means understanding how to build systems that prevent it in any context. Her phone showed another news alert. Mitchell Standards stop unprecedented cyber fraud attempt. The transformation she had engineered was expanding beyond anything James could have imagined when he thought he was destroying her. James's latest appeal was denied, Rachel mentioned as the day wound down. He's still trying to claim some credit for the reforms, saying his investment strategies inspired them. Sarah shook her head, amused by his continued attempts at manipulation. The man who had dismissed her as too soft was now watching from prison as she transformed the very industry he had tried to exploit. "Schedule the Global Ethics Summit," she instructed. "It's time to expand the standards into new sectors." Looking out over the city lights, Sarah reflected on her 3-year journey. The pregnant mistress who had appeared at her door, thinking she was delivering a crushing blow, had instead sparked an unprecedented revolution in corporate accountability. "Your mother sent a message," Rachel said softly. "Asked if you ever think about how differently things might have turned out." "I do," Sarah replied, reviewing the latest impact reports. "I think about how James's betrayal could have destroyed me. Instead, it showed me exactly what I was capable of building." Her phone displayed another headline. "Mitchell Standards Now. Required for Global Business Certification." The transformation was complete, but its impact would continue to reshape industries for generations. "Sometimes," she mused, watching the sunset paint her building's name across the skyline, "the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. About building something so significant that the people who tried to break you become nothing more than a cautionary tale in your success story." The office lights dimmed automatically, but Sarah remained at her window, contemplating the empire of integrity she had built from the ruins of betrayal. James had tried to break her spirit, but had instead unleashed something revolutionary. "Tomorrow's schedule?" she asked Rachel. "Global board meeting at 9, then the UN Ethics Commission, followed by your keynote at the World Business Forum." Sarah nodded, gathering her things. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of global transformation. His betrayal, meant to destroy her, had instead created something unprecedented, a new era of corporate integrity built on the very qualities he had mocked. 4 years after the night that changed everything, Sarah sat in her private jet, reviewing reports as she flew to London for the launch of the Mitchell Institute for Corporate Ethics. The world below seemed smaller now, just like the betrayal that had once threatened to destroy her. "Latest implementation statistics," Rachel said, handing over a tablet. "The Mitchell standards have now prevented over $200 billion in fraud attempts. We're seeing adoption rates accelerate across all sectors." Sarah nodded, scanning the data that proved her transformation of global business was still expanding. Her phone buzzed. The Economist wanted an exclusive interview about how personal betrayal had inspired industry-wide revolution. "Ms. Mitchell?" Michael appeared from the jet's conference room. "Oxford and Cambridge are competing to host the European branch of the Institute, and Harvard Business School has made your story required reading for all MBA students." It was fitting. 4 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was literally rewriting the rules of global business ethics. "There's a situation at the London office," Rachel mentioned carefully. "Jessica tried to apply for an entry-level position. Apparently, she's been struggling to find work with the scandal still following her." "Standard protocol," Sarah replied without looking up. "No exceptions to the ethics requirements, regardless of personal history." Her phone lit up with updates from the World Bank. Another major fraud ring had been exposed using her protocols, this one involving cryptocurrency manipulation. The system she had built by studying James's deception was now protecting digital assets worldwide. "The BBC documentary aired last night," Rachel reported, pulling up the reviews. "From Betrayal to Revolution, How Sarah Mitchell Reshaped Global Business." Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's mockery of her methodical nature. Those same qualities had now made her the world's leading authority on corporate integrity. "The UN Secretary General confirmed," Michael added. "They want you to chair the new Global Economic Ethics Coalition, and the European Union is fast-tracking legislation to make the Mitchell standards legally binding." Through the jet's windows, Sarah could see the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly below. The view reminded her of her last vacation with James, where he had laughed at her careful planning and attention to detail. "Your first appointment in London is set," Rachel announced. "The Royal Commission on Financial Oversight wants to discuss implementing the standards across the Commonwealth." Sarah reviewed her presentation materials, each slide representing another piece of the revolution she had built from understanding James's manipulation techniques. His betrayal had taught her exactly how to prevent others from following his path. "We're getting reports from the Tokyo office," Rachel continued. "They've just prevented a major corporate espionage attempt using the Mitchell protocols. The system caught irregularities that traditional oversight missed." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Her methodology wasn't just about preventing fraud, it was about understanding and stopping all forms of corporate deception. "James sent another letter from prison," Rachel mentioned. "He's still trying to claim he inspired your success, saying without his mistakes, none of this would have happened." "File it with the others," Sarah instructed. "He never understood that inspiration isn't the same as credit. His betrayal showed me what needed to change. My response created that change." Looking out at the sunset painting, the clouds and shades of possibility, Sarah reflected on her journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, an architect of global transformation. "The London papers are already covering your arrival," Rachel reported. "They're calling you the most influential figure in business ethics since the Industrial Revolution." Sarah reviewed the headlines on her tablet. Each one confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct. Sometimes, she mused, watching the city lights of London appear on the horizon. The best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting extraordinary. About building something so significant that your betrayer becomes nothing more than a footnote in your legacy. The pilot announced their descent into London, where thousands waited to learn how one woman's response to betrayal had created a new era in global business ethics. Sarah gathered her materials, ready to continue expanding her revolution. "Tomorrow's schedule?" she asked Rachel. "Opening ceremony for the Institute at 10, then the Royal Commission, followed by your address to Parliament about implementing the standards nationwide." The opening ceremony of the Mitchell Institute for Corporate Ethics transformed London's financial district into a celebration of integrity. Standing at the podium before a global audience, Sarah reflected on how far she'd come from the woman who had once discovered her husband's betrayal. "4 years ago," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "I learned that understanding betrayal means understanding how to prevent it. Today, that understanding has created a new standard for global business ethics." The audience included world leaders, corporate executives, and academic pioneers, all gathered to witness the launch of an institution that would reshape business education for generations. "The Mitchell standards aren't just about preventing fraud," she continued. "They're about transforming how we think about corporate integrity, about creating systems where ethical behavior becomes the only profitable option." Her phone buzzed silently, another update from Rachel. The New York office had just prevented a sophisticated cyber fraud attempt using her protocols. The system was working seamlessly across digital and traditional platforms. "Ms. Mitchell," a prominent CEO asked during the Q&A, "your standards have revolutionized how we approach business ethics. What inspired you to think so systematically about prevention?" "When someone shows you exactly how they exploit trust," Sarah replied, "they also show you exactly how to protect it." Through the Institute's towering windows, she could see the changed face of London's financial center. Banks that had once operated in ethical gray areas now proudly displayed their Mitchell Standard certification. "The impact of your work is unprecedented," a World Bank representative noted. "How does it feel to know you've created something that will outlast generations?" Sarah smiled slightly. "It feels like the perfect response to someone who thought they could break me." Her phone displayed a news alert. James had given a prison interview, claiming he had always known Sarah would accomplish great things. His attempts at retroactive support only highlighted how completely she had transformed his betrayal into triumph. "Your reforms have changed more than just business practices," a journalist observed. "You've created a new model for responding to personal betrayal. How do you view that aspect of your legacy?" "I view it as proof that how we respond to betrayal matters more than the betrayal itself," Sarah answered. "We can let it destroy us, or we can use it to build something unprecedented." After the ceremony, Sarah met with educational leaders eager to implement her curriculum in business schools worldwide. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates about new applications of her protocols, new sectors adopting her standards. "Oxford won the bid," Rachel reported as they moved between meetings. "They're already breaking ground on the European campus. Cambridge is now bidding for the research center instead." Sarah nodded, reviewing architectural plans for the institute's global expansion. What had started as her response to betrayal was now becoming a permanent part of the international business landscape. "The Prince of Wales is confirmed for tomorrow's dinner," Rachel continued. "The royal family wants to discuss implementing the Mitchell standards in their charitable foundations." Through the institute's vast atrium, Sarah could see students already filling the lecture halls, eager to learn the principles she had developed from understanding James's deception. "Your next appointment is ready," Rachel announced. "The Tech Consortium wanting to integrate your standards into artificial intelligence ethics." Sarah gathered her materials, each document representing another expansion of the system she had built from betrayal. James had thought he was destroying her future. Instead, he had inspired her to reshape the future of global business. "Sometimes," she mused, watching the sunset paint London's skyline in shades of possibility, "the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting exponential, about building something so significant that your betrayer becomes nothing more than a case study in your success." The Institute's lights illuminated automatically, creating a beacon of integrity in the heart of London's financial district. Sarah remained at the window, contemplating the legacy she had built from the ruins of betrayal. "Tomorrow's schedule?" she asked Rachel. "Global faculty orientation at 9, then the Royal Foundation meeting, followed by your keynote at the World Ethics Forum." Sarah nodded, preparing for another day of expanding her revolution in business ethics. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of global transformation. His betrayal, meant to destroy her, had instead created something unprecedented, a new era of corporate integrity that would endure for generations. 5 years to the day after Jessica had appeared on her doorstep, Sarah stood in the Grand Hall of the United Nations, preparing to accept the Nobel Prize in Economics. The journey from betrayed wife to global reformer was about to receive its highest validation. "The committee's citation is finalized," Rachel reported, showing Sarah the elegant document. "They're recognizing your revolutionary transformation of global business ethics through the Mitchell standards, creating unprecedented systems for corporate integrity." Sarah nodded, reviewing her acceptance speech. Her phone buzzed, another headline about how personal betrayal had inspired the most significant reforms in economic history. "Ms. Mitchell?" Michael appeared with updates. "The implementation of your standards has now prevented over $500 billion in fraud attempts worldwide. The World Bank is calling it the most successful oversight system ever created." The timing was perfect. 5 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was receiving the world's highest honor for transforming that discovery into global change. "There's a letter from Jessica," Rachel mentioned carefully. "She's writing a book about her experiences. Wants to know if you'd consider providing a statement." "Standard response," Sarah replied calmly. "Her story is her own to tell. My focus remains on the future of corporate ethics." Her phone lit up with updates from the Mitchell Institute. The protocols she had developed by studying James's deception were now being taught in business schools worldwide, creating new generations of ethical leaders. The Wall Street Journal retrospective is out, Rachel reported, displaying the article. 5 years of the Mitchell Standards, how one woman's response to betrayal revolutionized global business. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's mockery of her methodical approach to everything. Those same qualities had now made her a Nobel laureate and the world's leading authority on corporate integrity. The UN Secretary General confirmed, Michael added. They want to make the Mitchell Standards part of international law. And the World Economic Forum is creating a permanent committee to oversee global implementation. Through the UN's soaring windows, Sarah could see New York City stretched out below. The view reminded her of nights spent documenting James's deception, never imagining how far that documentation would take her. The ceremony preparations are complete, Rachel announced. World leaders, business executives, and academic pioneers are all here to witness the recognition of your work. Sarah reviewed her notes one final time, each page representing another piece of the revolution she had built, from understanding James's manipulation techniques. His betrayal had taught her exactly how to prevent others from following his path. James sent a congratulatory note from prison, Rachel mentioned, still trying to claim some credit for inspiring your success. File it with the others, Sarah instructed. He never understood that inspiration can come from negative examples as well as positive ones. Looking out over the city she had helped transform, Sarah reflected on her 5-year journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, a globally recognized architect of corporate reform. The networks are all carrying the ceremony live, Rachel reported. They're calling it a watershed moment in business ethics. Sarah reviewed the media coverage on her tablet. Each story confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct. Sometimes, she mused, watching the sunset paint the UN building in shades of gold, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting exceptional, about building something so significant that your betrayer becomes nothing more than a footnote in history. The ceremony was about to begin. Sarah gathered her thoughts, preparing to address the global audience. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of unprecedented change. Ready? Rachel asked softly. More than ready, Sarah replied, stepping toward the stage where the Nobel Committee waited. It's time to show the world what can be built from betrayal. As she moved to accept the prize, Sarah knew this wasn't just a personal triumph. It was validation of a simple truth. Sometimes the worst betrayals create the best opportunities for transformation. James had tried to break her spirit, but had instead unleashed something revolutionary, a new era of global business ethics built on the very qualities he had mocked. Sarah's Nobel acceptance speech resonated through the Grand Hall, each word carrying the weight of her extraordinary transformation. World leaders, business titans, and media representatives sat transfixed as she outlined how personal betrayal had inspired global change. 5 years ago, she began, her voice steady and powerful, I discovered that understanding betrayal means understanding how to prevent it. Today, that understanding has created a new standard for global business ethics that will endure for generations. The audience listened intently as she detailed how documenting one man's deception had led to preventing countless others from following his path. Each point illustrated how personal pain could fuel professional revolution. The Mitchell Standards aren't just about oversight, she explained. They're about transforming how we think about trust, integrity, and corporate responsibility, about creating systems where ethical behavior becomes the only viable option. Her phone buzzed silently. Another update from Rachel. The London office had just prevented a sophisticated market manipulation attempt using her protocols. The system was working flawlessly across continents. Ms. Mitchell, the Nobel Committee chair remarked during the following reception, your work has done more than prevent fraud. You've created a new paradigm for corporate ethics. Sarah nodded, accepting congratulations from world leaders and industry pioneers. Her phone displayed constant updates about new applications of her standards, new sectors adopting her protocols. The Yale Law Journal article is out, Rachel reported, showing Sarah the publication. Mitchell Standards, the legal framework that redefined corporate accountability. Through the reception hall's windows, Sarah could see Oslo's city lights twinkling below. The view reminded her of nights spent piecing together evidence of James's betrayal, never imagining how far that evidence would take her. The G20 summit confirmed, Michael announced quietly. They want you to lead the new Global Corporate Ethics Initiative. The UN is fast-tracking implementation across all member states. Sarah reviewed the proposal on her tablet, each page representing another expansion of the system she had built from betrayal. James had thought he was destroying her future. Instead, he had inspired her to reshape the future of global business. James's latest appeal was denied, Rachel mentioned as they moved between conversations with world leaders. He's still trying to argue that he contributed to your success by showing you how fraud works. Some people never understand the difference between inspiration and credit, Sarah replied calmly. His betrayal showed me what needed to change. My response created that change. The evening continued with a series of high-level discussions about expanding the Mitchell standards into emerging technologies. Each conversation confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The Institute's global enrollment numbers are in, Rachel reported. Over 10,000 students studying your methods across 6 continents. You're literally creating the next generation of ethical business leaders. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's mockery of her attention to detail. Those same qualities had now made her not just a Nobel laureate, but a transformative figure in global business education. Your next appointment is ready, Michael announced. The tech consortium wanting to integrate your standards into quantum computing security. Looking out over the Norwegian winter landscape, Sarah reflected on her journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, an architect of global transformation. Tomorrow's schedule? She asked Rachel. Royal Norwegian Business School keynote at 9, then the European Ethics Commission, followed by your address to the World Economic Leadership Summit. Sarah nodded, preparing for another day of expanding her revolution in business ethics. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct, replacing it with a new standard of integrity. Sometimes, she mused, watching the northern lights dance across the Oslo sky, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting extraordinary, about building something so significant that your betrayer becomes nothing more than a case study in your success. Her phone displayed another headline. Mitchell Standards now global benchmark for corporate ethics. The transformation was complete, but its impact would continue to reshape business practices for generations to come. 6 years after the night that changed everything, Sarah stood in the Oval Office, preparing to accept her appointment as the first global corporate ethics czar. The position, created specifically for her by international agreement, represented unprecedented authority to implement and enforce the Mitchell standards worldwide. The final confirmation votes are in, Rachel reported, showing Sarah the numbers. Unanimous support from all 193 UN member states. They're calling it the most significant international business reform in history. Sarah nodded, reviewing her acceptance speech. Her phone buzzed, another profile piece, this one examining how personal betrayal had led to the creation of a new world order in business ethics. Ms. Mitchell? Michael appeared with the latest statistics. The Mitchell standards have now prevented over $1 trillion in fraud attempts globally. The World Bank estimates they've stabilized entire national economies. The timing was perfect. 6 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was accepting a position that would give her unprecedented power to enforce ethical business practices worldwide. There's news from the prison, Rachel mentioned carefully. James is trying to write a book about how he inspired your success. Claims he intentionally showed you the flaws in the system. Forward it to legal, Sarah replied calmly. His attempts at revisionist history won't change the documented facts. Her phone lit up with updates from the Mitchell Institute's global campuses. The protocols she had developed by studying James's deception were now the standard curriculum in business, schools worldwide. The Washington Post special report is out, Rachel reported, displaying the article. From Personal Betrayal to Global Authority, How Sarah Mitchell Reshaped the Business World. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's dismissal of her methodical nature. Those same qualities had now made her the most powerful figure in corporate oversight. The implementation timeline is confirmed, Michael added. Starting next month, no major corporation can operate without Mitchell Standard certification. The global business landscape is literally being rebuilt according to your specifications. Through the White House windows, Sarah could see Washington spread out below. The view reminded her of nights spent documenting James's fraud, never imagining how far that documentation would take her. Your first official meeting is scheduled, Rachel announced. The heads of the world's largest corporations, all eager to demonstrate their commitment to the new standards. Sarah reviewed her briefing materials, each page representing another piece of the revolution she had built from understanding James's manipulation techniques. His betrayal had taught her exactly how to prevent others from following his path. Jessica sent another request, Rachel mentioned. She's struggling to find work anywhere. No company wants to hire someone who failed the Mitchell Standards background. Check. The standards exist for a reason, Sarah replied. Actions have consequences, and no one is exempt. Looking out over the capital city, Sarah reflected on her 6-year journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, the most powerful figure in global business ethics. The ceremony preparations are complete, Rachel reported. World leaders are gathering to witness the creation of this new role in global governance. Sarah reviewed the media coverage on her tablet. Each story confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct. Sometimes, she mused, watching the sunset paint the Washington Monument in shades of gold, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting unprecedented, about building something so significant that your betrayer becomes nothing. More than a cautionary tale in history. The ceremony was about to begin. Sarah gathered her thoughts, preparing to accept a position that would give her the power to enforce ethical business practices across the globe. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of a new world order. Ready? Rachel asked softly. More than ready, Sarah replied, stepping toward the door where the president waited. It's time to show the world what can be built from betrayal. 10 years after Jessica had appeared on her doorstep with news of her husband's betrayal, Sarah stood atop the Mitchell Global Ethics Tower, the world's tallest building and headquarters of her international oversight empire. The view stretched, beyond the physical horizon, to the ethical landscape she had reshaped. Final decade review numbers, Rachel reported, presenting the comprehensive analysis. The Mitchell standards have prevented over $5 trillion in fraud, transformed business education worldwide, and created a new era of corporate accountability. Sarah nodded, reviewing the data that proved her transformation of global business was complete. Her phone buzzed. Time magazine had named her Person of the Decade for revolutionizing corporate ethics. Ms. Mitchell? Michael appeared with updates. James was released from prison this morning. He gave a statement acknowledging that your reforms have created the most significant change in business history. The timing was poetic. 10 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was receiving his acknowledgement of how completely she had transformed his betrayal into triumph. Jessica sent a final message, Rachel mentioned, carefully. She's written a memoir about being on the wrong side of history. Wants to know if you'd consider writing the foreword? No need, Sarah replied calmly. Her story is just one small chapter in a much larger transformation. Her phone lit up with updates from the Global Ethics Council. Another major fraud attempt had been prevented using her protocols, this one involving quantum computing manipulation. The system she had built by studying James's deception was now protecting technologies that hadn't even existed when he betrayed her. The United Nations. Report is out, Rachel reported, displaying the analysis. Mitchell Standards, the most successful reform in economic history. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's mockery of her methodical nature. Those same qualities had now made her the most influential figure in global business. The final statistics are confirmed, Michael added. Every major corporation, government, and institution now operates under the Mitchell Standards. You've literally rewritten the rules of global commerce. Through the tower's panoramic windows, Sarah could see the transformed skyline of the business district. Buildings that had once housed corrupt practices now stood as beacons of ethical commerce, their operations governed by the standards she had created. Your next appointment is ready, Rachel announced. The Quantum AI Consortium wanting to integrate your standards into the next generation of business technology. Sarah gathered her materials, each document representing another expansion of the system she had built from betrayal. James had thought he was destroying her future. Instead, he had inspired her to reshape the future of global business. He tried to visit the Institute this morning, Rachel mentioned. Said he wanted to see what you'd built from his mistake. Standard protocol, Sarah replied. No exceptions to the ethics requirements, regardless of personal history. Looking out over the city she had transformed, Sarah reflected on her decade-long journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, the architect of a new era in global business. The anniversary gala preparations are complete, Rachel reported. World leaders are gathering to celebrate 10 years of the Mitchell Standards. Sarah reviewed the media coverage on her tablet. Each story confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct. Sometimes, she mused, watching the sunset paint her tower in shades of gold, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting eternal. About building something so significant that your betrayer lives to see their victory become their greatest defeat. The gala was about to begin. Sarah gathered her thoughts, preparing to address a world she had fundamentally transformed. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of global change. Ready? Rachel asked softly. Always, Sarah replied, stepping toward the elevator where history waited. It's time to show the world what another decade of ethical transformation looks like. As she descended to the gala, Sarah knew her work wasn't finished. The Mitchell Standards weren't just about preventing fraud or enforcing ethics. They were about creating a world where integrity wasn't just rewarded, but required. James had tried to break her spirit, but had instead unleashed something revolutionary. A new era of global business ethics built on the very qualities he had mocked. 15 years after the night that changed everything, Sarah stood in the Great Hall of Harvard Business School, preparing to deliver the commencement address to the first generation of business leaders who had never known a world without the Mitchell Standards. The journey from betrayed wife to global icon was now shaping the future she had once fought to create. The final impact assessment is ready, Rachel reported, showing Sarah the comprehensive data. The Mitchell Standards have not just prevented fraud, they've fundamentally altered how humanity approaches business ethics. Sarah nodded, reviewing her speech. Her phone buzzed, another headline about how her response to personal betrayal had created the most significant transformation in economic history. Ms. Mitchell? Michael appeared with updates. The quantum ethics protocols you developed have just prevented the first attempted AI-driven market manipulation. The system is evolving faster than the threats. The timing was perfect. 15. Years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was witnessing how her response had reshaped not just present business practices, but their future evolution. "There's an interesting development," Rachel mentioned carefully. "James Jr. has applied to the Mitchell Institute. He wants to study ethics and corporate responsibility." Sarah paused, considering the irony. "Standard admissions process," she replied. "Let him earn his place like everyone else." Her phone lit up with updates from the Global Ethics Council. The protocols she had developed by studying James's deception were now protecting business practices that hadn't even been imagined when he betrayed her. "The Wall Street Journal retrospective is out," Rachel reported, displaying the article. 15 years of the Mitchell Standards: How One Woman's Response to Betrayal Created a New Economic Order. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's mockery of her systematic approach. Those same qualities had now made her the most influential figure in human economic history. "The final statistics are remarkable," Michael added. "Not a single major financial crime has succeeded in any Mitchell Standards-compliant institution for the past 5 years. You've literally made ethical business the only viable option." Through the university's historic windows, Sarah could see students gathering for graduation. Young minds shaped by her standards, ready to carry her vision of ethical business into the future. "Your introduction is ready," Rachel announced. "The dean wants to emphasize how your personal story has become the foundation of modern business education." Sarah reviewed her notes one final time, each page representing another piece of the legacy she had built from betrayal. James had thought he was destroying her future. Instead, he had inspired her to reshape humanity's economic future. "James sent a message," Rachel mentioned. "He's working as a junior compliance officer now, implementing the very standards that exposed his crimes." "Life has a way of teaching humility," Sarah replied. "Sometimes the best lessons come from our worst mistakes." Looking out over the campus, Sarah reflected on her 15-year journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, the architect of a new era in human economics. "The ceremony preparations are complete," Rachel reported. "These graduates will be the first to enter a business world that has never known anything but the Mitchell Standards." Sarah reviewed the faces in the crowd. Each young graduate represented how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct. "Sometimes," she mused, watching the morning sun illuminate the historic hall, "the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting eternal, about building something so significant that your betrayer's greatest achievement becomes following the rules you created from their betrayal." The ceremony was about to begin. Sarah gathered her thoughts, preparing to address the future she had helped create. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of generational change. "Ready?" Rachel asked softly. "More than ready," Sarah replied, stepping toward the podium where destiny waited. "It's time to show these graduates what they can build from their own challenges, 20 years after Jessica had appeared on her doorstep, Sarah stood in the control center of the Mitchell Global Ethics Network, the AI-powered system that now monitored and protected ethical business practices across Earth and its first lunar colonies. The view screens showed real-time data from every corner of human economic activity. 20-year analysis complete, Rachel reported, displaying the holographic results. The Mitchell Standards have prevented over $50 trillion in fraud, attempts, and fundamentally restructured human economic behavior. Sarah nodded, reviewing the quantum data streams that proved her transformation of business ethics now extended beyond Earth. Her phone buzzed. The Mars Colony Project wanted her to design ethics protocols for the first interplanetary commerce. "Ms. Mitchell?" Michael appeared with updates. "James Jr. has graduated top of his class from the Mitchell Institute. His thesis on transforming personal ethics into systemic change cited your response to his father's betrayal as the ultimate Case study. The timing was poetic. 20 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was watching the next generation, including his own son, build upon the foundation she had created from that betrayal. Jessica sent a message, Rachel mentioned carefully. She's working as an ethics compliance teacher now, using her own story as a warning to students about the consequences of unethical choices. Forward it to the Institute's case study department, Sarah replied. Every story has educational value when properly contextualized. Her phone lit up with updates from the Lunar Business Council. The protocols she had developed by studying James's deception were now protecting humanity's first extraterrestrial economies. The Global Economics Review is out, Rachel reported, showing Sarah the analysis. The Mitchell Revolution, how one woman's response to betrayal reshaped human economic evolution. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's mockery of her methodical nature. Those same qualities had now made her the architect of humanity's economic future. The quantum ethics AI has identified a pattern, Michael added. It's using your original documentation of James's fraud to predict and prevent entirely new forms of financial manipulation before they're even attempted. Through the center's panoramic screens, Sarah could see the real-time pulse of global commerce. Every transaction, every business decision, every economic choice now shaped by the standards she had created. Your next briefing is ready, Rachel announced. The Space Commerce Committee wants to discuss implementing the Mitchell standards across all future human settlements. Sarah reviewed the proposals, each document representing another expansion of the system she had built from betrayal. James had thought he was destroying her future. Instead, he had inspired her to reshape humanity's economic future. James has requested permission to speak at the Institute, Rachel mentioned. He wants to share his perspective on how his actions led to the greatest transformation in economic history. Standard protocol, Sarah replied. His story is already part of the curriculum, no need for personal appearances. Looking out over the networked display of human economic activity, Sarah reflected on her 20-year journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined. The architect of humanity's economic evolution. The anniversary symposium is prepared, Rachel reported. World leaders are gathering to celebrate how the Mitchell standards have created a new era of human development. Sarah reviewed the global data streams. Each metric confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken centuries of corporate misconduct. Sometimes, she mused, watching the data flows from Earth to Moon. The best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting evolutionary. About building something so significant that your betrayer becomes nothing more than a historical footnote in humanity's progress. The symposium was about to begin. Sarah gathered her thoughts, preparing to address a civilization she had fundamentally transformed. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of human economic evolution. Ready? Rachel asked softly. Always, Sarah replied, stepping toward the podium where history waited. It's time to show humanity what the next 20 years of ethical evolution looks like. 25 years after the night that changed everything, Sarah stood in the observation dome of the Mitchell Lunar Ethics Center, watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon. The betrayal that had once seemed world-shattering now appeared tiny. From this literal and metaphorical distance, quarter-century impact report complete, Rachel reported, her hologram steady despite transmitting from Earth. The Mitchell standards have become so fundamental to human commerce that new generations can't conceive of business without ethics. Sarah nodded, reviewing the quantum-enhanced data that showed her transformation of business ethics now spanned the solar system. Her phone buzzed. The first interstellar mission wanted her to design ethics protocols for humanity's expansion to the stars. Ms. Mitchell? Michael's hologram appeared with updates. James passed away last night. His final statement was an acknowledgement that his greatest legacy was inadvertently inspiring the most significant transformation in human economic history. The timing was fitting. 25 years ago, she had been a woman discovering her husband's infidelity. Now she was literally above the world where that betrayal had occurred, watching humanity evolve beyond it. James Jr. sent a message, Rachel mentioned carefully. He's been appointed Dean of Ethics at the Mitchell Institute. He wants to ensure his father's cautionary tale continues educating future generations. Approve the curriculum update, Sarah replied. Every step of this journey, even the painful ones, has educational value. Her phone lit up with updates from the Mars Colony Project. The protocols she had developed by studying James's deception were now protecting humanity's first interplanetary economies. The historical archives have released their assessment, Rachel reported, displaying the analysis. The Mitchell Revolution, how personal betrayal catalyzed human economic evolution. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering James's dismissal of her systematic approach. Those same qualities had now made her the architect of humanity's economic future across multiple worlds. The quantum ethics AI has achieved another breakthrough, Michael added. It's using your original documentation of James's fraud to develop protocols for preventing economic manipulation in post-scarcity societies. Through the dome's crystal walls, Sarah could see both Earth and the lunar city that housed humanity's first off-world financial center. Every transaction, every business decision, every economic choice shaped by the standards she had created. Your next conference is ready, Rachel announced. The Interplanetary Ethics Council wants to discuss implementing the Mitchell standards across all future human settlements. Sarah reviewed the proposals, each document representing another expansion of the system she had built from betrayal. James had thought he was destroying her future. Instead, he had inspired her to reshape humanity's future across the stars. Jessica's autobiography is being added to the Institute's required reading, Rachel mentioned. Her journey from betrayer to ethics advocate has become a powerful teaching tool. Every story has value when it serves progress, Sarah replied, watching Earth slowly rotate below. Looking out at the stark lunar landscape, Sarah reflected on her 25-year journey. The woman James had tried to destroy had become something he could never have imagined, the architect of humanity's ethical evolution beyond Earth. The memorial symposium is prepared, Rachel reported. World leaders are gathering to discuss how the Mitchell standards will guide human expansion into the cosmos. Sarah reviewed the interplanetary data streams. Each metric confirmed how far she'd come from that night of discovery. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead broken humanity's ancient cycle of economic corruption. Sometimes, she mused, watching the Earthrise paint the lunar surface in blue light. The best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting transcendent. About building something so significant that your betrayer's death becomes merely another milestone in humanity's progress. The symposium was about to begin. Sarah gathered her thoughts, preparing to address a civilization she had fundamentally transformed. The woman James had dismissed as too soft had become the architect of human ethical evolution. Ready? Rachel asked softly. Always, Sarah replied, stepping toward the podium where destiny waited. It's time to show humanity what the next quarter century of ethical evolution looks like.